So good morning, everybody. Well, it's good morning here in London in the UK. However, at the other end of the line, I've got Janine and Brian, who are on the other side of the world. So welcome, really delighted. And I was just saying before I hit the record button, how unusual it is to get actually the partner of somebody with limerence along as well, and how important that is to get their perspective. So I'm really appreciative of both of you for coming along. And let me straight away just hand it over to you. Do you want to just introduce yourselves, tell us a bit about your background, and then we'll take it from there?
Certainly. Well, first of all, hi, David. Thanks for allowing us to spend time with you talking about our experience. I would like to thank you for all the work that you have done in the limerence field and continue to do, and also to thank Brian for joining me here. He's just going to tell us a little bit about us, and then I can jump into my experience with limerence.
Yes, so Janine and I met quite a long time ago. We've been together for close to 35 years now, and we've just celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary not long ago. We've got two children who are both grown and young adults at the moment, and yeah, we've lived a pretty good life. Always been together, and yeah, no real dramas.
Great, lovely, thanks for that. So Janine, do you want to just start by sort of telling us a bit about your own experience of limerence and take us through that?
Yes, certainly. So before I start, I just want to point out that I have a written master's in dissertation in applied XYZ. The important word here is applied. So I have actually spent years learning the practical application of theoretical perspectives. So basically taking a theory and applying it to a real life situation. And in my case, limerence. So in short, I was my own experiment. I did not undergo therapy to help me work through my way out of limerence, so I know therapy is hugely beneficial. I also want to highlight that this is my way out of the rabbit hole, and it is not the way out. I'm a firm believer that one must find what resonates for them to support their healing. So I know you've asked where it all started, David. Do you want me to jump in there?
Yeah, that would be great, Janine. Thanks.
Okay, limerence started about 10 years ago, and it was a really strange beginning because it felt as though I was going to implode. You know, that strange, unexplainable feeling of mixed emotions swirling around for no apparent reason, like a black hole ready to suck in every particle of my being. But can you believe that this all happened seconds before meeting LO? Anyway, one day I went for an interview and was told to wait in the reception area where one of two interviewers would come out to get me. And while I was waiting, my hubby's just pointing, saying, slow down, slow down.
Yeah, plenty of time.
So while I was waiting, I had an uneasy feeling about the lady interviewer, who later turned out to be LO. And at the time I prayed that I would be ushered into the interview by the male interviewer. Surprisingly, I felt a preconceived sense of safety with the person who didn't end up interviewing me. However, with regards to LO, I presume I had an unconscious premonition of, oh crap, this is not going to go well. This relationship is not going to turn out well. And it didn't, basically. But who does that? I hadn't even met LO. Still, going by the feeling in my stomach, I did not want to meet LO. So I was really hesitant there. In fact, I knew nothing about the interviewers. They were at the time complete strangers. So I look at it as our paths crossing as being the beginning of a metaphysical relationship. It's never happened again, that experience. And but here is the strange thing. Limerence for me did not start until a year later. When it finally dawned on me that I was limerent, I told hubby about it straight away, which he will talk about later on. So limerence for me was a time of confusion, which resulted in catastrophic mind games. So I did the only thing I've always done in times of chaos, and turned to hubby for support, knowing full well it could spell the end of our relationship. The way I viewed it was that if he rejected me, I knew I was in the wrong relationship, regardless of limerence or not, since I was not pursuing LO. I was pursuing freedom from limerence. So yeah, so I really did lean on hubby in those times, because it is this really, really confusing. And as much as I want to bring LO into being part of those mind games, creating and sustaining those mind games, I cannot, simply because I am the only one who lives in my head. Just the thought of living in my head space, I'm looking at my husband here, scares the bejeebers out of him. He already believes he's trapped in hell being married to me for a start. So imagine being trapped in my head. David, he would not last a day. So that's basically how it all happened. I met, I didn't want to be interviewed by a complete stranger who turned out to be LO. And then a year later, I realized I was limerent.
So a year later, did you know what limerence was, or did you come across the term later on than that?
Much later on. I simply thought I was gay, and that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I want to pick up on. I think it's really interesting because we often see same-sex limerence amongst women. I've never heard of it with men who have always assumed they're heterosexual, and then they develop sort of limerence. And I'm curious why that is. But had you ever had homosexual feelings for other women before?
Never.
So how did that?
Never.
So what was that like for you?
A huge identity crisis, which I'll explain about a little bit later on.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great.
Was that, I mean, not only is limerence a mind, so is, when it messes with your identity, it really throws everything out the window.
Yeah, you can use it. You can use expletives if you want. Don't worry.
And well, I certainly did feel like it, and but I was just confused, so I turned to my husband. That's what I've always done, and I just knew if he wasn't able to support me, then maybe I wasn't in the right relationship.
Right.
So that to me is a huge part of trust and respect and support and all that.
Okay.
So our life situation at the time of limerence seemed normal, nothing out of the ordinary. In fact, I would go so far as to say our relationship was in a really good place. We were all happy and healthy and enjoying life. It was a good place emotionally, physically, and mentally. I was in a good place emotionally, physically, and mentally. The only thing that changed were my career path and where I met LO and my sexual identity. So even after that, our relationship remained stable. There were no major ups and downs. No one blamed each other. Simply nothing out of the ordinary happened. Hubby knew, Brian knew of my limerence. He didn't understand it, but then nor did I. So in our minds at the time of disclosing to Brian, I was gay, and that was it. In fact, his words after disclosing that I thought I was gay was, "Oh, I thought so." But then falling in love with a woman was the only beginning of my very strange and wonky limerent journey. As it turned out, it had nothing to do with LO, nothing to do with our marriage, very little to do with my sexuality, and everything to do with ego discovery and healing past childhood wounds. That pretty much wraps up my experience.
Yeah. Okay, good. And hopefully you'll expand on that a bit later on.
Yes, sure.
Great. Do you want to keep going?
Okay, so you asked the early life years and about FOO and why I think some of us get limerence.
Yeah. Let me just. I think what you've just said there is so important. I just want to reiterate what you just said, and because there's so much confusion around. We believe when we're limerent, it's all about the magical other. The other person is the answer to all our dreams. If we run off with them, it's going to fix us and make us happy. And it's utter bullshit at the end of the day, because exactly as you just said, Janine, it's all about us, and it's about, and I keep banging on about this on the forum. It is, I believe, it all comes from childhood. So I'm really interested to hear a bit more about what you discovered about your family of origin, as we call it, FOO. I refer to it as FUFU, fucked up family of origin, because most of us have fucked up family of origins. So yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Well, actually, I didn't delve into it too much, because there's a part of me that really wants to. When you've reached where I'm at the moment in my journey, and I'm completely and utterly out of limerence, I'm not limerent at all, and there's a part of me that turns to respecting family and respecting, not actually discussing what my upbringing was like, just out of respect. So I will talk a little bit about it, but I haven't gone into it in great depth.
Yeah, sure.
So my upbringing was an interesting one, where there were no secure attachment styles, probably, if anything, avoidant, anxious. I did look into the background, and after unpacking it, I could see how it played a part in my journey, along, of course, with societal discourse, the way my parents were raised and the era they were raised in, etc. So in short, my parents learned how to parent from their parents, which meant I learned from mine. From generation to generation, we all had a hand in each other's journey. So I do take my hat off to limerence, playing a large part in helping to heal those early childhood wounds. But isn't it interesting that the limerence journey would detour back to where it started? I believe we were raised to be limerent rather than it being a magical occurrence, like you said. And perhaps the same applies to LOs, in that we find someone who mirrors our own unique combination of dysfunction, which triggers us to do our own work. So
and I agree with that bit, and I think that's what attraction. I think the far bigger part of attraction is unconscious, and it is the attunement of wounds that resonate with each other. But the thing with limerence is that we get caught in this loop where we can't consummate the relationship, and not everybody seems to get caught in that like OCD loop. And I don't know, that's the piece that I'm still trying to work out. Why are some of us more prone to that?
That is a good question. That's certainly one I can't answer.
Yeah, but I agree with you that I think we are, that whether limerence is the right word or it's new relationship energy, that we are all prone to find people that we are strongly attracted to. It's the biological imperative to recreate, reproduce, and some people really, they trigger us. It's like that magnet that we get pulled towards.
Yeah, well, for me, what was strange is that it didn't have anything to do, which I'll talk about a little bit later, my sexuality in the end, after discovering what I felt was, what worked for me in my journey. It was mainly about my ego. So, yeah.
Okay.
And
So I look forward to hearing more about that. Okay, so we're still, I think, pretty much on the same page, and even if we're not, that's good. we can agree to disagree respectfully if there's things that you hold different views, and I certainly acknowledge I don't have all the answers. But anyway, keep going. It's
okay.
It's interesting. Well, I'm finding it interesting.
I'm itching to get over this so that hubby can talk.
Okay.
And incidentally, those questions that you've posed for Brian, I have not heard the answers to, so it's going to be good for me too.
Okay, great.
Maybe
you've got some other questions you want to ask him as well whilst he's...
Ooh, I don't want him asking me questions though.
No, you ask him questions.
Yeah, I'm done and dusted with the limerence. Okay, so what worked for me? Part of my healing my childhood wounds was allowing myself to be vulnerable and opening myself up to things I wanted kept hidden in the shadows, such as my own manipulative behavior, greed, selfishness, and jealousy. Now, these things didn't just include negative aspects. In fact, one thing I had to learn was to embrace the grayness of what was hidden instead of labeling things as virtuous or immoral. For example, it isn't selfish to put yourself first, and it isn't narcissistic to love all aspects of yourself. What it is, in my opinion, is liberating. So what I found was that the more I became liberated from labels, the more others did too. Erik Erikson is quoted as saying, "The more you know yourself, the more patience you have for what you see in others." So when I was limerent, I made a connection between a friend's gender transition and my own emotional spiritual growth, both being a private and individualized process that seemed to run parallel with each other. I witnessed my friend not only transition physically, but also psychosocially, which takes me to Erik Erikson's theory of stages of psychosocial development. In each stage, Erikson believed people experienced a conflict that serves as a turning point in development. If people successfully deal with the conflict, they emerge from the stage with psychological strengths and essential skills needed for a strong sense of self. Can you see where this is going, Dave? All part of that building up of the self. I'm of the opinion that my friend had transitioned through the stages as a male, but not as a female. So essentially she was starting all over again in a different body and mindset. I witnessed her acting out the same way you would imagine a young child acting out. I also witnessed her pushing boundaries the same way a teenager would. So her transition occurred in her 60s while I was limerent, and it was here that I made a connection to Erikson's stages of development for assessing my ego development, with a particular focus on the existential question, who am I? Initially, limerence took me down the identity crisis path where I ended up grieving the person I thought I once was in relation to my orientation. However, as mentioned before, limerence had very little to do with my sexuality and everything to do with ego discovery and healing past childhood wounds. So I recently stumbled across Deepak Chopra, who talks about grievances and suggests that one should abandon all grievances, since grievances come from the ego, and that every decision made is a choice between a grievance and a miracle. Helen Schuckman, who is an American clinical psychologist and author of A Course in Miracles, wrote that the greatest miracle is the act of simply gaining a full awareness of love's presence in one's own life. So I think for me, I lacked a lot of that. I lacked it from my parents. I lacked it within. It simply had no recognition, a great deal of recognition in that regards. So now this might seem a little bit off track here. I often ponder on the notion, is there a God? And if so, is it possible that he or she is the very person I'm interacting with, waiting to see if I pass the test? Like the song One of Us by Joan Osborne. What if God was one of us, just a slob like one of us, just a stranger on the bus trying to make his way home? The test, of course, and only in my opinion, is whether we can identify and recreate miracles. For me, limerence is the miracle, and getting out of the rabbit hole was the test. It was the limerence experience that gave me an appreciation of self-love, while the limerence journey helped to increase my awareness. For a long time, it felt like limerence was the test and finding a way out of the rabbit hole a miracle. So that pretty much sums up how I'm feeling with my aha moments that I came. There was a time where there was a moment I had some clarity that basically highlighted my own ego position. So I would find myself in a lot of drama and a lot of conflict, and internally as well. So in order to teach us the lessons of our egos, Carlos Castellan, I can't even say his name now. That's it. We need a petty tyrant in our lives, and if we don't have a petty tyrant, we ought to go out and find one. Deepak goes on to say that if your ego is your internal reference point, you had better plan on feeling offended for the rest of your life. So if you think about that, if your ego is your internal reference point, your entire life will be a series of offenses and perceived insults. If you're not interested in living that way, according to Deepak and myself and others, you have to cultivate gratitude and let go of grievances. Ego without awareness leads to self-importance. Self-importance and self-pity are the same thing. So conflict in all shapes and form helped me to see my own self-importance. Having a petty tyrant meant I was able to see myself through the lens of others. And that was huge for me. It was discovering that, there was that, was it the coin, the two sides of the same coin, and looking in the mirror and seeing. So, so I was basically trapped in this battlefield in my own head with limerence and just with conflict in general. And then I'll go on to tell you how I got out of it.
Yeah.
How I let go of everything.
So there's a few things that are really interesting I want to pick up on. You just said something about dealing with conflict, and I just want to, on the forum, you were one of the few people that would be what I would call a straight shooter. You would just say it as it is. And at times that did create, conflict on the forum and ruffle feathers. And, and I think sometimes that's, I think often that's necessary. And it was always, and I would read most posts, and I was always interested to see how people would get so triggered because they were so unconscious by you just pointing out things that you saw in a way that was very clear. Reminded me of a lady on the predecessor to the forum on tribes.net. I think she was Australian or a Kiwi as well, called Una. And she had the same ability, clarity of vision, just to see stuff so clearly. And it used to piss people off because, like, in a way, she could see the truth in a different way. So that, but the other thing, a couple of things, gender, I mean, that's fascinating because when I got limerence, literally in that same day, I'd sort of started making friends with a guy called Kevin, who over the course of the 4 years became Kim and transitioned. And I was very friendly with, her now. And it was really interesting, the conversations we had around identity and gender. And it really stopped me to think about my own identity and how I identify myself as a human being, and what makes me a man. And I just think it's fascinating, that whole area around identity. So it's interesting how you had a friend also sort of parallel lives almost. And then you touch on the spirit. What I'm sensing is that it was a spiritual experience for you as well, is what I'm picking up. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, definitely. I went down the I'll let Brian discuss that a little bit later on, what the other details. It was very much looking in the mirror, but I had to find that I had to drum it up, and I had to find the people that would play with me so that I could see myself, and it was ugly. It was ugly, but it is what actually helped me to put my ego in check and grow. There was so much growth. It was phenomenal. And if you just listen to any of Deepak's work, and I've only recently come across it, but then having said that, I'm long out of limerence, so I had discovered a lot of these things for myself. It's just finding a way to move on, and that was my way, basically. Yeah.
I went to hear him in London once, Deepak. Interesting chap, and he did a fascinating documentary with his son. I don't know if you ever saw it, and I think he's a bit addicted. He was addicted to his phone at the time, and in this documentary, his son's often having a go at him. They went on some retreat in India, I think. Really interesting. Made me laugh, but yeah, he talks a lot of good stuff. How much he practices it with his ostentatious lifestyle, but hey, who am I to judge?
Yeah, right.
but yeah,
he's not addicted to their phone, David. He's not addicted. So yeah, I mean, limerence is viewed as an addiction. It's viewed as all sorts. It's viewed as an awakening. It's I think that's the interesting thing, is that as individuals we have to find what resonates. And I've certainly gone through the whole lot, and I'm itching for Brian to ask you about twin flames, because I've gone through so many theories and viewpoints and all sorts, and I just basically came back to myself. It was all about me in the end anyway. So yeah.
Okay, great.
So the last little bit of letting go, opening the limerence exit door. So for a long time I fought limerence, the feelings and the thoughts it brought. The longer I fought, the longer the torment persisted. I woke up one day and asked myself, what would happen if I embraced limerence? What would happen if I embraced the thoughts, the conflict, everything? So I set about changing my inner dialogue to yes instead of no. So rather than lean away from limerence, I leaned the fuck in and finally stopped pitying myself. The only thing that kept me fighting was fear of the unknown. And as it turned out, I really didn't have anything to fear. So that's basically my journey. I started saying yes and embracing whatever situation I was in. If I didn't like it, it didn't matter. It was where I was, and it was there to teach me something. And yeah, that is basically how it all panned out for me. And I've long left the limerence behind, not a single thought. I mean, even if I do think about LO, it doesn't conjure up any feelings.
Is this person in your sort of life still, or do you ever do your paths cross with them?
No, not at all. I don't have any, you know, I mean, obviously when you're limerent, you wish it would, and although you don't want it to. But for me, it is, I don't care whether I do or I don't. It's I'm not fearful of it, put it that way, because it really wasn't about her. So,
but were you able to move on whilst you still were in proximity of her, or did you have to sort of break that physical connection, as it were, before you could move on?
No, well, so in short, we went different ways because she left work, and that, you know, there was no concrete relationship. It was pretty much in my head.
Yeah.
And that was what I battled with. So it wasn't like I had to deal with her. And the times that I did were times that I ran away because I didn't want whatever this thing was that I was plagued with. So,
do you feel that you could have made the progress and moved through limerence whilst she was still around you? If like, were you?
I do.
Still... Okay.
I do. Yeah, I do. I don't think this has to be all consuming. It doesn't have to take over every, you know, aspect of your life. I mean, we know how it feels. Limerence know how it feels, and it pretty much does do that. I think there's a small part of you that can hold on to being, you know, logical and say, if I take ABC steps, there's a chance that I can work through it with them. I'm not going to, you know, advocate for that. It's an individual thing. It's certainly not an enjoyable experience. Yeah. That's my little bit. I've got a little part which I will read later on if we've got time. It's only a small paragraph from Reinventing the Body, Resurrecting the Soul from Deepak, and it actually mentions, well, in my view, it mentions limerence. But I'm going to let you talk to Brian now. I'm all talked out.
Okay, great. So, Brian, welcome, and thanks for sitting there so patiently and not interjecting and listening respectfully, which is wonderful. So, yeah, great.
I'm a good listener.
Great,
I'm a good listener, and yeah.
Let's hope you're a good talker as well.
Oh
no, he's not, David. He's not.
I'm not a talker.
All right. Well, I'll have to squeeze it out of you then. But yeah, so firstly, thanks. Really appreciate you being here as well. So how did Janine break the news to you? And what was that like? What happened when she told you?
Well, it happened quite early in the morning. It was like about 4:30 in the morning. And Janine brought me a cup of coffee in bed, which is, yeah, that's completely out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
So that was a shock to start with. And then Janine said, you know, she just said she needed to be completely honest with me and she had something to tell me. And so I appreciated her telling me. And yeah, it was sort of, I was, I suppose, stunned and shocked at the time. Didn't really know how to work through it and that, but I felt that the relationship that Janine and I had was strong enough that we could work through it, and yeah, which we have done, and everything's worked out fine.
Okay. And did she tell you it was for a woman when she told you that she had feelings for somebody else?
Well, that's where she said that she thought she was gay. She didn't know she was limerent at the time, and that sort of thing. So she said that, she thought she was gay. So that was, a surprise as well.
Yeah, that must have been quite a shock.
It was, yeah.
And
But it was, like I said, like the strength of our relationship and that sort of thing was strong enough to work through that.
right. And how and then sort of during the course of her limerence, how often would you talk about it, and was it
I think for the first probably 6 months, we were talking about it continuously, like working through it, growing through it, and working through the process of what was happening, and we were both mature enough to understand that it wasn't really the fault of the relationship or an individual need or desire or anything like that. It was just sort of happening.
right?
So
There was no
writing.
fault on anyone's part or anything like that. It wasn't a rejection.
So and that in itself is interesting, and I think quite unusual, because I think with most situations, limerence, that we're either pushed away from what we don't like or pulled towards what we do like. And I think in most cases it's both, that our primary relationship has grown hollow, and it's just not giving us our needs are not being met. But it sounds like for you guys that very much wasn't the case, and your relationship was still strong. The connection was strong.
It was, like it did come out of the blue, because we, no marriage is perfect or anything like that, but we were, like Janine said earlier, we were in a good space, both mentally, physically, and everything else. Things were going really great between us. Janine was studying and that, and my work was going well. There were no external pressures or anything like that. So
right.
And we were just able to. Sorry.
And did at any point sort of Janine express a desire to go and consummate this relationship with this other person, or was she aware enough to know that this was about her and nothing to do with the limerent object?
No, at the early stages, it was sort of, there was a bit of experimentation and
He gave me the green light, David, to go out and experiment and find myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I went to work one day, and I was really confused about it myself, and I was just out on a job site, and I wrote a letter to Janine just explaining everything, and pretty much said, gave her the green light if that's what she needed to do for herself, and felt that she, if Janine wanted to grow and that sort of thing, I wasn't going to stand in her way, and that I'd always be there for her.
So that takes a lot of maturity to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Which, okay. And again, in my experience, that level of emotional maturity doesn't seem to happen often in relationships where one half of that person gets limerence.
Right.
Sounds like, Janine, you're a bit of an outlier here.
What, sorry?
You're a bit of an outlier.
What is that?
Well, in a good way. No, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that.
Oh, right.
What I mean is, you don't fit. I think the typical picture with limerence is somebody whose primary relationship is dead or is having problems. And I do. Yeah. And I think a big part of limerence is that we are so angry internally, but we can't express that to our significant others. So we go off and have an affair, it's one of just many other reasons. But I do see this often, and where couples don't do conflict, I mean, what you as a couple, were you always able to talk about difficult subjects and work stuff through and not fear conflict?
Oh, David, we're just your typical couple that argue and, have ups and downs, nothing major. We eventually work things out. Yeah, so in this situation, it was a matter of, who am I and what is this about? And it really wasn't about Brian and our relationship at the time. As I mentioned, there didn't seem like I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that there must be something wrong with our relationship. And for a long time, I really, really looked at that. I mean, I spent about a good 2 years researching, okay, there's something wrong with Brian. There's something wrong with me. What's the gap? Where is it? Where is it? And I just kept coming back to just to me. I mean, I'm sure Brian plays a part in that, but I couldn't find it. And even though I said earlier on, I didn't go to, I didn't get therapy. What I did in the last 3 months is I went to a therapist, and it so happens that she's gay, which I didn't know about at the time. Not that that's any difference, but I just found that quite funny. And by the 5th session, she said goodbye, because she said, well, what have you got to work through? And I only went there because I thought, okay, what am I missing? Have I need some outside person to have a look and see, is there something going on that I can't find? And there was nothing. So we just parted ways. I think I'd pretty much unpacked everything. And I'm in a really good place with my family, with my upbringing. I learned to forgive. I just let go of those grievances. And even the conflict now, I'm not perfect. I'm not saying that, I'm never going to get riled or anything like that. But what I have found is that if someone's got an opinion or doesn't like my opinion, I go, okay, that's fine. I can move on. It's not an issue for me. There's nothing for me to battle with that.
So you don't have a fragile ego.
No. Well, I'm heading that way. Yeah.
Are your parents both alive?
Yes. The old man, he's still hanging in there. He's still hanging in there.
And if something's bothering you about your relationship with them, or they behave in a disrespectful way, do you talk to them about it? Or do you just keep it to yourself and just avoid the conflict with them?
I don't think I avoid the conflict as much as not getting riled. I just see what they say as what they own. Yeah. And it's not a reflection on me anymore. I have a lot of empathy for them, and I also, it must be really difficult being in that sort of age bracket where their bodies are breaking down, their eyesight's going, their hearing's going. I mean, as it is at the moment, we're working through reconnecting with Brian's mother, who has dementia. So we've both got parents who are sort of slowly working, breaking down in front of our eyes. And yeah, you just have a different perspective. You just have a huge appreciation for all the things they did get right, as opposed to constantly looking at what they didn't do or didn't get right. And Limerence, I feel, has brought me to that point.
Sorry, go on, I interrupted.
No, I was just saying the Limerence journey, I feel, has brought me to that point. I don't think I would have gotten to this point had I not experienced what I did. Yeah.
Well, what I see with clients that I work with is that their inner child has so much fear around just speaking their truth to their parents. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be around, I'm big on not blaming parents, because if we blame, we just end up, we're the ones that get caught in the position of the victim, but about not fearing, just being honest with our parents about themes that sometimes are difficult, things we're struggling with in our own lives. And I just see some of my clients, they're like literally petrified, terror of their inner child in even having the audacity to speak up to a parent. And I do think that that is a necessary part now of the journey to growth. If our parents are still here, and if they're not, well, we have to do it in other ways. But the inner child work, but it sounds like your inner child doesn't have that terror of parents, and just, you know, I can tell by how you write on the forum that you're comfortable with putting your point of view forward, even if others don't agree with it.
Yeah.
I can laugh about that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Never held back.
Say that again. Say that again.
Janine's never held back.
Yeah. That's interesting. Wonder where that comes from.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, say more.
So,
say more, Brian. Spill the beans.
Excuse me. It's Friday night in New Zealand, so having a beer.
Okay.
While we're talking, but
yeah, that's allowed. Yeah. So where does that part of Janine come from that she doesn't hold back?
Very much her father.
Right.
Yeah. It's very much like her father. He's very opinionated and his way or the highway sort of thing. And he's got a kind soul as well in a way. Yeah. And Janine's developed that relationship with him now where it's she doesn't get riled up by his antagonism and that sort of thing. It's just she deals with it and moves on and gives it back to him, or doesn't take it on board anymore, which is great.
Yeah, that's good. So what advice, Brian, if somebody, if you were talking to somebody whose partner has got limerence, what would you suggest how they best handle it?
I think you just have to try and be mature about it and realize that, it's not necessarily anything to do with yourself or the relationship. It could be just something completely off track, and you just need to talk with each other and make sure you both understand why it's happening, and how to work through it. Yeah.
And did you have a sense that this wasn't anything to do with the other woman, and it was more about Janine's own journey that she was on and trying to find herself?
It was, it seemed like more of a journey for Janine to discover who she was, and that rather than, like an infatuation or obsession with another person.
Well, that's what limerence is.
Yes, I know. You have explained that to me before. But it didn't seem that way at the time.
Right.
It seemed more of a growth.
Yeah.
Personal growth than
I think for me it was, I expressed my dissatisfaction with feeling limerent. I didn't want it, and so he was aware of the battle that I was going through myself. I think rather than if I was talking to other couples who, the limerent person, I wouldn't necessarily go and say, well, you've got to tell them that you're in love with this person and you want to run away with them and marry them. I mean, as a partner, you wouldn't want to hear that, I think. But the crux of it is it's a battle. It's an inner war, and just get support for that. Get support, whether that's the forum or people who've experienced it, your partner, your friends, whoever can help you to walk through that journey with.
Yeah.
So
it's because it is the mother of all battles, in my opinion, and we do need help. We need support, ideally from our significant others, but that's always not possible.
Yeah, I think it's the person who is limerent could probably word it or be gentle with their sorrow. I mean, I think it's difficult for both parties.
Yeah. Although how can one be gentle when we've developed these strong feelings of, just strong feelings for another human being? If the relationship isn't solid, it does threaten the whole foundations of the relationship. And I think that's where it becomes problematic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely.
But as far as developing feelings for another human being, what are both of your views on that?
we're looking at each other here. We're like, what? So what do you mean by that, David? Like, I know what you said, but what are our feelings?
I think it's part of the human condition that we meet people in our lives where we're strongly attracted to, not just necessarily in a sexual way, just energetically. And I meet so many people where their view is that's wrong, that you're married and you should only have eyes for your partner, and you shouldn't lust after anybody else. And I just think that's unrealistic. I don't think as humans that's how we're made. I think that people come through our paths, cross our paths, and they have a big impact on us. And I just wondered your view on that.
Well, I think that's normal. I don't see that as being a thing. It's just who we are, and it's just, I don't see it as being an issue. I don't see it as being a thing. I think we all experience that. It's the obsession, the being obsessed part that we don't. Being attracted to someone or finding something attractive about someone or a quality, or, I was thinking about that the other day, and someone who saves a pet or an animal, I mean, that to me is attractive. So I can find that quality in someone very, very attractive. But it doesn't mean I'm going to obsess over them or have thoughts of running away with them. So for me, it's not a thing. You're going to find other people attractive.
Yeah, and I just wonder if there was less taboo around this and just more acceptance that that's how we are as humans. Maybe some of us wouldn't get so caught up in this in the OCD cycle because of the secrecy that we feel we have to keep. We just it's just, we shrug our shoulders and say, well, that's, part of who I am. Nothing wrong in it. I don't have to act on it. That's the other thing. Just because we have feelings doesn't mean to say we have to go and act those feelings out.
And also, I mean, when you look at it, you could reword that and say admiration. You admire someone, you admire a quality. So
yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, admiration sounds a lot better than attractive and that sort of thing. Yeah, and like you said, you don't have to act on it. You have to know your boundaries. You have to know the boundaries in your relationship, and you don't. Yeah, there's no need to act on them.
And that's
if you did want to act on them, well, then you need to look at ending the relationship before you do. Otherwise, it just screws everyone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hadn't thought of that. Is that the difference between admiration and attraction? One of them we want to act it out, and the other we don't feel the need to act it out. We can just view it from afar and be boundaried.
Yeah. Well, admiration is a lot of people I admire, but I wouldn't jump into bed with.
Yeah, they have slightly different nuances, I suppose. So you mentioned before about twin flames, soulmates. You wanted to talk a bit about that, did you say, or not? Happy to go anywhere.
Janine's trying to get me to, I don't know what you.
I wanted Brian to see your reaction to it. I thought it's quite funny, actually. What you think of twin flames. Brian has no idea what it means, and but I just wanted him to tease you about it and
try and trigger me and try and get a reaction from me.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I'm sort of having to sort of use careful words. I'm not a big believer in the whole soulmate myth. I put soulmates and twin flames into the same box, and I have to acknowledge I've read a bit around it. I'm not an expert on these theories at all, but certainly in the early stages of my own limerence, I read around it because it felt like I'd met my soulmate, and I just think that it is unconscious wounds that attract us. That some people, I was thinking about this morning. There are some people that we are just very, very strongly attracted to, and there may be, attraction is so complex, but I do believe the bigger part is similar life experiences, or it might even not even be in our lifetime. It might be our ancestors, our parents and grandparents, that have wounds around perhaps abandonment. And I know for me that there, in my own limerent object, her, I did find out stuff about her because we were training together, that abandonment was a big part of her life story, and that was a big part of my life story with my father's Holocaust experience. So for me, that's why the attraction was so strong. There were other things as well playing out in that drama as well, but it's so easy just to say, oh well, it's all this spiritual sort of woo-woo stuff, and we had past lives together. And I think that bypasses the opportunity for growth. And there's a paper that by John Welwood, who coined the term spiritual bypass. And I see this so often, and I agree with him. He's a Buddhist psychotherapist in California who came up with this term, where he saw lots of people, especially in the sort of yoga industry, that were getting all into these spiritual areas and transcending their consciousness, but at their heart, they were avoiding doing the deeper work around the ego, the wounded ego, around their early life wounds, their childhood trauma, and they were avoiding doing some grief work around that. And I think that the people who are going down the twin flame and soulmate path are the ones that are avoiding going into the grittiness of their trauma and healing that. And I know from my own experience, that is where my growth came. It was grieving, doing that deep, painful grief work of my ancestors. It wasn't my experience, but it was my father's experience. And there was other stuff I was having to grieve, my own losses as well. My mother had just got dementia and things like that. And it would have been so easy just to go down the spiritual path. And I think often what happens with limerence is we consummate, we go off, we have an affair, we think that's the answer, and it just creates chaos and havoc all around for everybody involved. It's not the answer. And is, like you said, Brian, sort out your own stuff first and leave the relationship if you feel the relationship's not working, and then pursue an affair. But sadly, that just so rarely happens. I think women probably do that better than men if they're in an unhappy relationship. I think women in general, I know this is stereotyping, but I do believe men and women are different. I think women are better at leaving a relationship and growing through that loss, whereas men, and I have so many men that I coach that have jumped straight from failing marriage into an affair or relationship, or going through the divorce process, and the divorce hasn't even begun yet and they're already starting a relationship with another person. And it's the mother of all distraction. What better way to fall in lust or think we've met our soulmate and to not face our demons and not look at and not deal with our pain of loss. So yeah, that's does that make sense as far as my own theories on twin flames and soulmates?
Absolutely. And I love that article, the spiritual bypassing article.
Oh, you've read it, have you?
Yeah, I do. I've read it.
His work, and he's written quite a few books on conscious loving, and I think they're really good books. John Welwood. I'll put a link to this video to his to the paper and also to his articles. But yeah, I think he's good. Sorry, I cut you off there, Janine.
No, that's right. No, I do. I agree with you. And I did look at the twin flames. Rather than being a soulmate, I think it's a soulmate from hell when you think about it. So yeah, there are some views of, because I went back to look at this again recently, and Jeff Brown, who I think came up with this term wound mates, was a lawyer and now a psychotherapist, and he's written a book called An Uncommon Bond. Some people talk about good soulmates, not a soulmate from hell, where if we are both more conscious and it's not our wounds that interacting and that we've done some work, we still are going to meet people that it can be a very positive experience. I'm still not convinced on that. I still think attraction, when we feel that strong magnetic attraction to somebody, however conscious we believe we are,
I still think it's unconscious stuff that is showing us something that we're not seeing in ourselves. And all I know is the more work I've done, the less that happens where I get pulled to somebody else in that, and it hasn't happened now for years. But even after my own Limerence, there were 2 or 3 episodes where I felt that feeling to somebody else, but that hasn't happened for about 4 or 5 years now. And I don't think it will. I don't think I'm going to get that pull because I've done enough work on myself now. But I can't say for sure it won't happen again. And if it does, it's showing me something I need to look at in myself. Again, it's about me. What am I not seeing in myself?
Yeah, I've sort of come to the full circle in a way that I think it's okay. I think for me, it's those sort of feelings that we've had and sort of battled our way through. We're okay. We are okay. There's a part of us that's okay, and it's all going to turn out for the better. It's really hard to say it without sounding all woo-woo, but yeah, I'm not scared. I'm not scared of Limerence at all. I mean, I've come to a great place. It's helped me to work through a lot of things. And how can you be scared of something like that? It leads you down a,
Yeah. And you would know how to deal with it. And I think that's for me it just knocked me completely sideways initially. And it just like my foundations, my tectonic plates of who I was just completely shifted. And for me, that was so difficult to deal with.
Absolutely. And then add, your orientation to that, and it really flips things upside down.
Yeah, I bet.
So, yeah.
So you had something to read from. You said before you had something to read from.
Sure. So Reinventing the Body and Resurrecting the Soul from Deepak. It was, from your soul's perspective, all urges are based on legitimate needs. When the need is seen and fulfilled, the urge fades away just as hunger fades once you eat. However, when a need is denied or judged against, it has no choice but to become more insistent. Urges build up, pushing against the resistance that is trying to hold them down. At a certain point, this war between urge and resistance becomes so strident that you lose sight of the original need. When someone is pulled towards illicit sexual urges, for example, it is all but certain that a simple need for love, gratification, self-worth, or acceptance has become deeply buried. All that is visible is the illicit urge and the war it rages with shame and guilt. So the ultimate issue isn't whether you can win the battle against your bad urges, but whether you can find the need that fuels them. When you can satisfy a basic need, impulse control is no longer a problem. So basically, yeah. Lastly, bad urges don't make you a bad person. Acting on your urges serves only as a temporary release of energy, like opening a steam gasket. There will always be more steam. Your personal demons will get worse if you keep being ashamed of them. Guilt is a perception, and all perceptions are open to change. Love awakens the soul.
I like that. That's beautiful. Yeah, and he mentioned shame at the end there. And we know that.
But this one,
yeah, go on.
Sorry.
This
one's about reinventing the body and resurrecting the soul. So, and that sort of ties into that whole body that you've talked about with the books and getting back into your body.
Yeah. And working through our shame, where we don't feel shame about something that is, as we've talked about today, is just part of being human.
Absolutely. So I think that does.
Yeah, and hence and that's the motivation for keep pushing away at what I'm doing and doing these interviews, just to help other people understand that they're not alone and there's no shame in it. It's just we're all trying to get through this life in the best way that we can, with as least pain as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Anything you guys want to add or ask each other that whilst you've got me to facilitate so I can stop a war between you? Not that I sense that a war would break out between the two of you.
No, well, you know, for me or for both of us, I'll just ask Brian actually while I'm here. Is it over for you, honey?
It's never over with you.
Oh, God, there we go.
Never a dull moment, I suspect.
No, there's always something.
Well, I tell you what we can add, what we did of late actually, is the couples challenge. Have you heard of that? We created a couples challenge.
No, say more.
So you go into an op shop or a second-hand shop and you buy an outfit for each other, you know, wigs, everything, the whole lot.
Shoes, necklaces.
The whole lot. And you dress each other up as you would want them to be dressed up, and you give them a different name and you go out on a date. So yeah, it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting to see how your partner wants to see you dressed, and you go out and you're a different person, and rather than picking someone from Tinder, you've got a new person and a new personality. And
I like that. That sounds like
go
fun.
and have fun. Yeah.
And what about if your partner wants you to dress up as the opposite sex? I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, my wife might want to dress me up as a woman, go out as a woman.
One of the rules was no cross-dressing.
Yeah, Brian said,
that was the first rule that I came up with when Janine brought it up.
Yeah, he didn't want to wear a dress. Yeah. But yeah, there's sorry.
Interesting what it brings up, you know, sort of fears and anxieties about this stuff.
Yeah, well, it's just, yeah, there was only 2 rules. There's 1, it has to fit, and 2, no complaining.
So have you done it?
Yes.
And are you able to disclose the characters that you chose for each other, or would you rather not?
I was a cross between mafioso and a 70s porn star.
Okay. What about Janine? What was she?
Well, you can describe what you.
I was a mixed bag, actually. I felt like a sack of potatoes stuffed in in this tight little dress. But yeah,
and a nice hat.
And a nice hat. But we did go out and have fun. We got a few strange looks, but we had fun, and we could only use the names that we'd chosen for each other. So yeah, he did ask me at the end of the date whether it would be okay if he could see me again, and.
I hope he didn't try and kiss you.
No, not on the first date, David.
So is this something you've come up with, or have you come across this?
I came across it, and then I sort of changed it around and came up with this new challenge. So yeah,
I like it.
I don't know what to call it. That was just, yeah.
And then still got the clothes.
We've still got the clothes, and he's still got the big chunky gold chain, and you know that he. But yeah, so basically, just go out, have fun, enjoy each other, and don't be afraid to share your feelings with your partners. You know, if that's what you're able to do, then that's the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's great. And that actually, that exercise, you know, maybe that's a way of us connecting with our alter egos to be able to better express how we feel, or in a way that we find really difficult if we're not playing some role. So I really like that. I'll talk to Ruth about it and see whether I'm sure she's up for it. It's whether I'm up for it or not. I think she has a more sadistic sense of humor than me. So
probably the hardest part for me was being in a second-hand op shop and going through the women's section trying to find clothes. We've got some strange looks from me.
Yeah, women seem far more comfortable wearing men's clothes than men wearing women's clothes. And again, that's, you know, why is that? Why are women so much more comfortable with crossing that gender divide, as it were? Anyway,
yeah, but it's just a chance to have fun. So,
yeah, great.
Thank you, David.
My pleasure. Thank you both. It's been really great to meet and hear both of you, and go well. And yeah, the journey continues, as we say.
Definitely.
All right. Go well.